I think it's so important to remember the Holocaust. When you hear the personal and enormous impact that's had on a whole generation of people, millions of people suffering just terrible, terrible circumstances because of who they are, it's both enraging and also so important that the story isn't forgotten, so it can never happen again. Agnes, I'm sorry it's so cold. We had hoped for a nice spring day to have this very important chat. It's very, very nice to meet you. I'm so interested in hearing about your story and everything that you've, I guess the best word is endured, really. Tell me, when did the Holocaust really hit Hungary?
Well, the beginnings of it hit Hungary before anywhere else. The first laws against the Jews happened in Hungary in 1920, even before Hitler arose. But thereafter, Hungary went to war on Hitler's side, on the German side. So while other Jews all over Europe were being deported and killed, the Hungarian Jews were still living at home. They were deprived of their civil rights. One after the other, laws came altogether, 42 laws against Jews. So all their rights were taken away, but they were not systematically murdered until 1944. And by that time, there were practically no Jews left in the rest of Europe. In 1944, in the spring, the German army occupied Hungary, and that's when the killing really started. And then, over a period of 8 weeks, they murdered almost 500,000 Jews. We were deported to Auschwitz, and that is when it happened. So by the summer of 1944, Eichmann, in charge of this activity, could report to Hitler that the Hungarian provinces were Judenrein, clear of Jews.
I mean, it's so hard to imagine how you grow up and have any sort of life in an atmosphere like that, where you're so suppressed and, as you say, had all your liberties taken away. I mean, that must be very difficult for you and your family.
My father was an exposed socialist, and it's one of those cases that he was first persecuted because of political reasons, even before he was persecuted for being a Jew. Then he was unemployed because the Jews professional Jews, could not carry on in their professions. And in my family, the men were professional men, doctors, lawyers, engineers, solicitors, and they were all unemployed. And so the whole of the extended family was living under very, very difficult circumstances. And then throughout my primary schooling, this anti-Jewish propaganda and atmosphere strengthened all the more. And in my last year in the junior school, I had a fascist teacher who was in love with Hitler, as she told us, a spinster. Hitler's photographs and posters all around the classroom. And the way she treated me was not short of child cruelty.
Oh, God, it's heartbreaking. I mean, your childhood, it's so difficult to imagine, one, being persecuted for who you are and your family not being able to work, then your schooling situation, the poverty that you lived in, and then in your very young years, you were forced to be a child labourer.
In my family, there was intellectual ambition. There was learning. So while I was, in fact, quite in various ways deprived as a child. I was also very rich because all the young men of my family were around.
And they were teaching you, were they?
They were teaching me. They had no children of their own. So I had all these surrogate fathers who enriched my life and brought me up in an intellectually stimulating environment, even when I was little. But then they were taken into the Hungarian army, and before when I was 8 or 10, they were all murdered. They are the people that I continue always to mourn. That is the aspect of the Holocaust that is most painful for me, the loss of those men.
It's so hard to imagine, but it's so uplifting to hear that despite all the various difficulties and horrendous situations you're in, that your mind was still ambitious, that you wanted to do something, that you were taught in such an incredible way, which you've gone on, haven't you? And I'm sure we'll come on to that, to what you've done with your life since you have escaped the situation that you were in.
When we were in the concentration camps, the first camp that we were taken into was an agricultural camp. It was a state-owned farm, and the rule was that who worked was given a food ration, and who didn't wasn't. Now, I volunteered to my family to say that I am 14 instead of being 11, so that I could work, so that we could have an extra food ration. Because the food rations had to be divided among ourselves. There were 11 of us, 5 not working, plus me, plus 5 working. So this is how I became suddenly 14-year-olds all of a sudden.
So you grew up very quickly.
As you say. And nobody forced me. Circumstances forced me to be a slave laborer as a child.
And what did you have to do?
Well, this was an agricultural camp. It was a farm.
Just physical, hard labour. I mean, you can't imagine at 11 having the physical strength to be able to do this kind of work.
The day started before the sun came up. So how many hours, I don't know. Of course, we had no watches. But every kind of labor, of work on a farm, we did. Some were heavier than others. Picking peas, for example, was a relatively easy task. There were other tasks which were harder. For example, when a field was plowed, this is mostly clay soil. Lumps of clay appear. Those are not people can't sow seeds into the clay when it is in big lumps. So you are given a wooden hammer, and now the dried up clay you have to beat until it is pulverized. The worst job of all was harvesting sugar beet, and I have a short story that I together about 300 words, what it is like to harvest sugar beet. You have to wait for frost to come, because the beet likes, the sugar comes out by the frost. So it's a late autumn task. There is frost in the ground, the clay is sticky, and you then try to lift out. Have you seen a sugar beet?
No.
It's about 2 pounds, 2-3 pounds of weight, huge, with a big bushy green on top. And you have to heave this out somehow. You have to have 2 of them. You beat them together to get the clay off. You chop off the green and you throw it into the bag.
How long did you have to do this for?
We started in the summer of 1944, as I told you. And the agricultural work finished with the sugar beet harvest, because then the snow came thereafter, no more. So then we were taken over to an armament factory instead. So we became industrial laborers. We were making anti-aircraft guns for the German army. And that was heavy enough work. I can describe the details of the work if you are interested. Children, I was by then 12. Between 12 and 16, you were child laborers. Now there the system was that there were child laborers. In the farm, you had to lie, as I told you,
to get your
be
food.
allowed to work. Here, in fact, it was organized.
I mean, how were you feeling? I mean, life must have been pretty bleak and without much hope that things would change. Could you see any way out of the situation you were in?
No, you didn't. It's very interesting you asked this, and sometimes I am asked, what were your hopes? How did you see the outcome of all of this? We didn't. People didn't think about tomorrow. People didn't think about the next minute. People were thinking about trying to live through this moment. So.
But you were on your way to Auschwitz, weren't you?
Yes.
But your train was diverted to this agricultural camp.
Yes, which was the lucky bit. We were on our way to Auschwitz, and within the 15,000, there was a single train with 3,800 people that was taken to Auschwitz but was diverted to Vienna.
And that's the train you were on?
And that's the train I was on. That was the only one. I actually tracked it down that there was only one train.
And why was it diverted? Did you ever find out?
There were negotiations between the British and the Germans, and yes, the Germans were trying to sell the British Jews for lorries. The tariff was 300 Jews for a lorry. They needed rolling stock for military transportation. And these negotiations went on throughout the war. They, in the end, never succeeded. But they held a number of Jews in some kind of, they called it Jews on ice, or exchange Jews. They held them in some sort of limbo land pending these negotiations. And those were the people that they took to Vienna. While they were there was labor shortage. Why was there labor shortage? Obvious, because the laborers were out in the front fighting.
In the war.
Right? So they needed laborers. So while these Jews were kept on ice, negotiations,
you were doing the laboring.
They were doing the laboring. Another option, which is the best I can offer you, is that there was a train loaded with eggheads, famous rabbis, Nobel laureates, and so on, from the city of Dürr, a different place. They had the intention of taking that train load to Vienna so that they should be, if you like, valuable Jews on ice. And by mistake, that train was taken to Auschwitz.
And
the next train was to make up the 15,000. If you were religious, and I believe you may be, I'm not, then you would attribute it to a sequence of miracles that I survived.
I was reading your story about, when you were liberated, you then had to walk for a month to try to get back home. And only when you got back home, you were sort of had another devastating blow that lots of the men in your family were not coming home.
All but one. All the men of those uncles I told you, and all the friends of my family, all the young men, with one single exception, they were all killed, finished.
It's such an incredible story. I so admire the way that you've come through all of that and built this life for yourself and had a successful career. It shows remarkable resilience and strength of character and And also an ability to move forward where many people just wouldn't be able to. When you left the camps and you'd got home and you'd got through the terrible socialist years, as you described, and you got to England, and then you started this career, did you ever reflect back? Was that a driving force for you to go on and make this incredibly successful career for yourself?
Well, I don't know whether it's incredibly successful. Do you know what is incredible is that I survived at all. Now that is incredible.
Yes, that's true.
That took miracles. This one just took determination and hard work
And resilience.
and resilience
Yes.
and lots of other things. And like you describe, well, I didn't have the physical characteristics of most engineers.
No.
Any more than football managers.
Exactly.
I don't repeat the way you describe this, which is very funny and exactly correct. But I kept on thinking, those are not the parts of the human body that require for me to
Yes.
succeed as an
Absolutely.
engineer or as a
Yes,
manager
it's
or
up here.
yeah. And as you say, resilience and leadership qualities and various other things that one requires. So these are not incredible. So I ask myself, what drove me? I must say, it is not financial success, not because I don't value it. Of course I do. Not because I don't enjoy the situation in which I now am, which is comfortable, but all I ever wanted is enough money so that I wouldn't have to think about it. And
Yes.
that's all that I ever wanted, and I have achieved that. So then the question is, what drove me? I needed drive, which is, if I'm allowed, I would compare the drive I needed to the drive you needed and you displayed.
Every year, the March of the Living talks to Holocaust survivors about the experiences that they've been through. I guess that's sort of to teach a new generation not to forget what happened. Is that important to you? Is that why you do this?
It is important for people like me and other survivors to record their testimonies, and they go on the shelf together with history books and other documents. What is important to me is that there should be a message here, a message that people should behave in different ways from those, that they should develop their own inner strength so that they should not be ashamed when they look at themselves in the mirror. Like I hope I have nothing to be ashamed about, and that they should hand down work ethic, determination, social consciousness, and so on to the future. That is what I find is important.
I so agree with you. They say to shape the future, you have to understand the past.
Yes.
And I think it's so important that these stories are told. I really feel what you feel. I mean, one of the things about my own story is one of the driving things for me, which is nothing in any way that you went through, but was to have independence. I wanted to be in charge of my own life, to make my own decisions, to do the things I wanted to do when I wanted to do them. And I feel very much a kindred spirit with you, that despite everything you went through, every hardship, every heartbreaking thing you saw and experienced, that you wanted that for yourself. You wanted to live your own life in the way you wanted to live it, which took you through various different paths. I think it's incredible. It's been such an honour and a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you very much. I hope we shall meet again soon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Talking to Agnes today has really given me a deep understanding of the personal circumstances that her and her family went through. And I only think you understand how better to shape the future of the world if you really do understand the past. And hearing what she went through, the poverty, the starvation, the labour camps, the desperate nature of just trying to survive those circumstances, it's so important that we don't forget, so we never, ever put anyone in that situation again.